Okay, so why don't we get started? Thanks again for inviting me, Steve and Chris, to join you guys at this event. So this is actually the second time doing a VR conference. It's a little surreal to be in VR, talking about VR, but I think this is going to get more and more common going forward. So today I've really tuned my presentation more towards education and learning related to the VR space, VR, AR kind of together. So why don't we get started? I have about half-hour presentation, and I think we're going to have maybe a 10 or 15-minute Q&A. So, before we get started, I wanted to kind of tell you kind of what VIBE really stands for. We're really a company that's trying to be here to try to help change. We're trying to unleash human imagination from limitations of reality. So it sounds awful, but it's actually something that we believe in. We're doing this as something that helps for impact to the world, not just to sell more products. So if you can, see all the things that we're doing for the ecosystem, few of those actually generates today revenue for. But we really believe in, the long-term future of what VR can do for the society. So I have two very important people to thank to give me an opportunity to be here for today. So in 1991, I actually studied with Tom Furness. I don't know how you guys know him, but he is, a lot of people consider him the father of VR, and he's been studying it for over 50 years and researching it for over 50 years. I studied in his lab in 1991, and then in 2016, I was invited to join HTC and run the VIBE business for HTC in China by Shi Wang. So those two people have really contributed to me being here today. And I think Tom really 26 years ago put me onto the path to really believe in VR. And in fact, when I was studying in his lab, the things that I had really looked at in my research was how to bring VR to education to really make an impact. So, to be able to actually be on this VR stage talking about education is kind of a very surprising and very pleasurable path to be on, 20-something years later. So this is actually, I don't know how many of you guys have seen this piece of data, but I think it's quite interesting. It shows pretty much a direct correlation between education and future success. If you look at the top, the left chart, it's really talking about income as opposed versus education, and on the right, it's employment percentage or unemployment percentage versus education. And as you can see, there is a direct correlation on both sides. So the more education you get, the more successful you are in today's society. Now, I mean, going forward in 10 or 20 years, the type of education that's mentioned on this board about what these degrees are may not be what we are judged on. But at least in the current time, having essentially degrees associated with education is something that seems quite important to our society today. But one of the things that we seem to not be doing very well is the continuous education side. If you look at this piece of data from the New Yorker, it's saying that a third of people who graduate from high school and never read a book again in the rest of their life, and 2% of people who graduate from college, after college, they never read a book again. I mean, that's astonishing to me. But if this is true, we need to do more of these conferences to really help promote the concept of lifelong learning and continuous education. So go Steve and Chris, you guys are doing a phenomenal job to promote this concept. One thing I do want to kind of highlight it. Why is VR education important, and why does it work better? And book related or online screen, that different people learn differently. Right? 30% of people learn through listening. 30% of people learn through visual by seeing, and 30-something% of people learn through doing. And when you're in VR, you're actually able to do all three of these things in the same medium. And then your brain can activate fully. If you think about it, we've been on this earth for 6, 7, 8 million years, depending on who you believe, and we've been learning through our whole body our whole brain on that entire time. So we've evolved as animals or beings that learn through the entire the experience of what we do. And that's the most natural and most durable way for us to learn, not by looking at a piece of paper with words and then interpreting in our mind, visualizing it, and then trying to internalize it. Couple thousand years ago, essentially the way of learning is through oral instruction, right? It's somebody in the middle being surrounded by their students, and they talk and they tell stories, because that was the way that we taught each other. And about 100, 200 years ago, we invented the blackboard. If you look at this room, we're still in a format, even though we're in VR, we're still in a format where we're putting blackboards behind us. And this is the format that actually still is very close to what we do today in modern schools, 200 years after the blackboards were invented. We're still looking at a whiteboard, and maybe sometimes you're lucky enough to have a projector, but in essence, you're still looking at a 2D surface. The last few years, it seems like people are looking at the MOOCs and the online learning, where you don't have to be in a classroom, but you're still looking at a 2D surface. So all of these things are good progression, and it makes learning more accessible. It's still limiting in terms of how your brain is able to interpret and understand. In fact, I think less than 6% of people who start online courses actually, which is actually quite poor. So we really need to make sure that people get their chance to go and have a full immersive learning experience. If you look at this is what we would like future classroom to be, is that whatever you're learning, you have that subject in front of you. You have it where you're with the rest of your students, your peers, and with your teachers or guidance person. And they explain things to you, and you get to play with it and try it. And it's something that's exciting. And you're able to go on a field trip every day, whether you want to go underwater or you want to go in space, or you want to become the size of an atom, you could do that. And that's something that VR enables, which no other medium does today. So over the last 30 years, I've kind of went through these 4 different cycles of technology disruption. In the 1980s, 1981, I bought the IBM and got myself into the PC revolution. I remember how excited I was to look at that green screen and those characters and start programming with it. And I remember in 1993, 94, I got on the web actually, and worked with the Mosaic browser. And in 2007, I got my first smartphone. And so in 2016, when I asked to join HTC and I played with the Vive, it really showed me what I was learning and studying 20 something years ago back in the HIT lab, where we were using $300,000 devices, and it was a small fraction of that experience of what the Vive can provide for a few $100s, right? So I mean, over the last years, the industry has significantly increased, improved, and the fidelity has improved. And even in the last 2 years, what's happening now today with the wireless devices, with the standalone devices, with the high definition devices, in this industry is actually everything is happening so much faster. If you look at it took the PC something like 20 years to get to that 100 million level. It took the phone just a couple of 3 years to do that. So we're going to get into a accelerating adoption curve for new technology. And we're all very, very lucky to be at this stage, at this time, doing what we're doing. So we looked at the last kind of 30 years in the last chart. Here's a graphics I made that essentially talks about how screens have come in and maybe in the future will go out of our lives. About 200 years ago, there was no screens in our life. And then in the late 1800s, the movie screen appeared. The first movie was 1895, and the reason I put that train in the back was the first movie in the world was actually one of a train coming towards the person in the theater, and people were screaming, running out of the theater, thinking, "Wow, what is this thing that's running and going to crash into me?" But then, over the next 100 years, we've been adding screens. Every, few dozen years, we're adding more and more screens, from TVs to computers to, the smartphones, but then not the smartphone, not just telephones, and then smartphones, tablets. And in 2016 was really when commercial high quality VR became accessible to the general public. Now, if you look at what's going to happen going forward, we're going to see actually not an increase in screens. I actually think that over the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to have a significant decrease in screens, and maybe at some point going back to where we came from, which is no screens, which is a lot closer to what the Matrix would bring us to in some point. I don't know how long that is, but I don't think it's as far as a lot of people think. But the first screen that I think the VR devices are going to replace is going to be tablets. Because if you look at the slide, if you compare the functionality of a tablet and the usability of a tablet, pretty much on every aspect, standalone VR device outperforms the tablets. Depending on which device you buy, it could be cheaper to buy a quality standalone than it is to buy a high quality tablet today. So, and the portability is actually not that much different. Right? So instead of having a 10-inch screen, you have an unlimited screen that wraps around you. You have if you want to just watch movies, you can have a screen that is around you. You get to interact with it with all of your different interaction models, whether it's voice, touch, or movement. It's going to create a new form of entertainment, and that's going to happen, very, very quickly. I think over years, a lot of people will be replacing their tablets. Tablets is a large market. We're talking about 100 million plus units a year of tablets that are being sold. Right? Sometimes people say, but if you wear this VR on your head, is it bad for you? So we actually did a study about a year ago. We did a study that showed people who did an hour of use on the tablet versus an hour of use on the phone, on the high quality Vive device, and we actually found that they were pretty much the same. So in terms of the impact on your eyes and your vision, in fact, there's about 20% that had a slight improvement in their eyesight after using it. There's also somewhat a similar an impact with the tablet, but it's much smaller, about 7%. But overall, if you look at these two, it's actually quite equivalent. If we're comfortable using tablets every day in schools, we should be quite comfortable to let people use high quality VR devices. Now, I think that is important to say high quality, because if you're using, let's say, a cardboard device, you're probably not going to have as good a result, and you're probably going to have a lot of people who actually do feel sick because it just isn't the right refresh rate, the right latency, and the right interactivity, and it doesn't have 6 degrees of freedom, all the things that would be needed to keep people healthy and to use it comfortably. So, one of the devices we use most every day is our smartphones. And we also did a quick check of eye fatigue versus smartphones. So if you look, actually, after using a smartphone for an hour versus after using a VR device for an hour, there's more fatigue in your eyes from using your smartphone than there is from using a VR device. And a lot of people say, oh, but the VR device is an inch from your eyes. It's got to be bad for you. But the reality is it's actually a lot worse and a lot more fatigue for your eyes to focus on that 5-inch screen in front of you. That's only about a foot or a foot and a half away. Most people's eyes are, actually everyone's eyes is designed to look far away, to look at a long distance, and it's most comfortable looking at a long distance. And VR devices in general have a longer focal distance, somewhere between 2 to 3 meters long distance, versus a a cell phone that you're carrying or a tablet that you're carrying about 1 or 2 feet away. So you actually have to strain your eyes to look at a smaller screen. You also have to strain your eyes to focus at a lower, closer location. All of these things actually creates fatigue. Now, recently we just did a study, and we asked, are you, and does your children, have your children ever used a VR system? And at least in China, about half of people said, yes, my children have. And then we asked them, would you like your children to use a VR system? And about almost 80% of parents say, yes, I would like my children to use it. And then we asked them, what are you trying to do with it? What do you want them to use it for? And this is actually a quite interesting mix. People really, at least the people that replied to this, there was about 4,000 parents that replied to the survey, and they wanted to have people learn more knowledge. They wanted to have them experience and enhance their interest in learning. They wanted to have less. It actually should be not version impact, should be vision impact. So I think that's going back to the last one, where a lot of people have this misperception that looking at VR is bad for you. But from what we're seeing is that it's no worse, if not better, than using your tablets or your phones, which we allow our children to use every day. More family interaction. They want people to be playing multi-user activities that allow more people to be interacting at the same time and to have shared experience, etc. So I won't go through all the details, but it's nice to see that parents do want to see do see a variety of value that they can get. Now, we've also done a study recently with the Tsinghua University, technology university in China. What they're showing is that actually kids who use VR, they become more creative. So we had kids that did 2 tests. One test where they use VR, and then another group that did after they use VR. And we clear improvements in terms of creative mindset, in terms of solving problems for the 2. Getting kids to start being able to see new, to look at 3-dimensional thinking, to be able to manipulate objects in a virtual world, makes them think in a different way. And that's actually quite interesting. That kind of data is coming. We also found that actually kids who study in VR learn more. They do better in tests afterwards, and they retain more. Right. So for this particular study that was done about 1.5 years ago, we had a group of about 40 students broken up into 2 groups. One was a VR group, one was a non-VR group. And the VR group, after the course, the average score of the VR group was 93 points out of 100 for a astrophysics course. Right. And for the non-VR group, it was somewhere in the 70s. So it's essentially the difference between an A student and a C student. So about 20 points difference. If you look at, we did essentially another retest 2 weeks later, and the retention made the difference even bigger. So it was 20 points difference on the immediate test after 2 weeks later. It became a 22-point difference in terms of the average score. So, that's actually also quite encouraging. Now, here's the part that I thought was the most exciting, is that if you look at the worst student on the VR group, actually outperformed the best student in the non-VR group. And they were pre-tested to be exactly the same breakup of pre-test scores between the 2 groups. So what this really tells us is that every single child that's out there is a genius. We've just been teaching them with wrong techniques so that they're not able to learn and grasp. But when you give them their full ability to learn through audio, visual experience, then all of them find a way to grasp the concept and see that this difference between worst. I mean, you would expect some kind of overlap, but there was no overlap. Now, that was just for book learning, but actually it can also be used for sports learning. And a lot of us are watching World Cup these days, and one of our invested companies, Soccer Dreams, they actually worked with the Chinese Ministry of Athletics and used VR to teach their junior team, the Junior Olympics team, uh, soccer strategy. And it was the same. There was 4 teams, 2 teams that did the control group where they didn't use VR, and then 2 teams that did VR. And when it was after a month of training with the same coaches. One went up 30 something percent, the other went up 5% after a month of training. So even these kids who already are elite athletes that already outperforming their peers by a lot to be able to be selected to their junior team, you could see significant improvements. I mean, 30% improvements in capability after a month is amazing. So they've actually now they're going to make this application standard for all schools and athletic programs. In terms of memory, we also did a study. Let me see which school is it. This is Beijing Normal University, and when they used VR to help memorize subjects and order, you could see that no matter which way that you wanted to test memory, it helped, whether it's through direct recalling sequencing, or judging sequence, significant improvements between the VR group versus the non-VR group. And when we went in and we did a study asking our developers, for developers that are not working on games and entertainment, what else are you working on? The number one vertical industry being used by developers, or developers are building content for, is for education, right? So the reality is that education is probably the killer app of VR. A lot of people ask me, what's the killer app of VR? The reality is that this technology allows you to learn almost anything. And if we can make ourselves smarter, make ourselves more capable, make ourselves more creative, I mean, the value of that to society is enormous. So we're already seeing that, whether elementary level, high school level, or university level, VR is becoming used in pilot tests. We'd like to definitely see this go much further. In fact, about 3 weeks ago, the Chinese just issued an order to all provincial governments saying that within the next year, every province needs to start investigating in their schools VR education programs and VR labs. So, I really hope that kind of government endorsement and support would be part of every government. Right? We recently have done, several, I guess, pilot programs for education. So the first large-scale VR classroom was about maybe 6 months ago. I went to one of the inner parts of China, and we set up this 50 classroom, this bottom left, the 50 classroom Vive classroom, where we had to do a lot of special tricks to get all the lighthouses not to interfere with each other. We had 2 rows had their own pair of lighthouses. Now, 6 months later, we have on the top right where it's gone a lot easier. It took 5 minutes to set up this classroom, and it took about a week to set up the bottom left classroom. So with phone devices today, making accessibility to high quality VR much more easy, right? And much better. We don't need to buy computers. We don't need to have lighthouse setups on the corners. And the teacher can just use any laptop to be the central management system across students who have a shared experience. And they can just go on a field trip every day. In fact, every class, they could go on a field trip somewhere. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, that's what I always looked forward to, was when we had our class, our out of school activity and on our field trips. That's where I learned a lot. And, to the children these days, they can do that every day. So you have, VR labs where, where there could be potential dangers or explosions or poisonous gas. All of these things can also be done in VR. This was also one of our invested companies where they're setting up this. I think they already have 300 plus experiments set up in VR that has potential harm and danger, but you can practice it in VR so that there's no danger to the students to do these experiments. So we talked earlier about the soccer program. So these are actually our the students that had used the soccer training program for soccer strategy. For professional athletes, this is a product that's using our tracker system for full body tracking, and it's being used by Manchester United and Manchester City, both to train and rehabilitate their professional athletes. And the physics of the ball and how it's being kicked can actually be pretty much almost as accurate as the real thing. So so professional athletes can do these. We can definitely utilize them as amateur athletes. And it's now being used in medical industry. It's being used in design, and even in office related environments. Here's a very interesting application that just came out maybe 2 weeks ago. I saw this application where you're taking this MRI scan, but somebody's put a tracker, a Vive tracker on the back of a tablet, and to do three-dimensional X-ray viewing of a particular MRI scan. So now, instead of looking at one slide at a time on your big screen, you can actually move using your hands to move this tablet in 3D space, but then see on the screen the part of the person that you want to be seeing. So it becomes a much more natural way to inspect medical data. UPS about maybe 6 months ago announced their program to work with us to train their 100,000 drivers. So they want the drivers to be safe. They want the drivers to follow rules. They want to be able to make sure that they're also packing the cars as efficiently as possible. And they're using our devices to simulate various unique experiences, environments while driving, and make sure that they react properly. So I don't need to talk about VR conferencing because that's what we're doing right now. But this was actually one was a little bit different than our environment. When we launched the Vive Focus earlier this year, I think in January this year in Shenzhen, we had a simulation room that matched exactly the physical room we were doing the launch in. So and we actually had all the people in the room wearing Focus devices, and we had gone into a shared space where we had people dialing in also. If you look at the screen on the left, and on the left, this particular lady was dialing from Beijing, Shenzhen, Beijing, or I think not, yeah, it was Beijing, to participate in our conference, and everybody and in our audience was them in 3D space. But that 3D space matched exactly the physical space, so it was kind of virtual reality and a real reality. But when we looked outside, we didn't see it with headsets on. But, it was definitely a very interesting scene for the audience on both sides. Now we're actually seeing it going further now. It's becoming much more accessible. Where now one of our invested companies, VR Weibao, they can allow you to use a Focus, a Vive, a PC, or to have a shared experience, a shared conference. So you're in a common virtual environment, no matter which device you're on. So what I've been challenging our team on is that I want to do our weekly management meetings in VR. And before, the biggest complaints I got from my team was like, oh, I'm not going to be around. I'm not going to be by a computer. I'm not going to be by a VR system. So I'm going to tell our guys, hey, like as long as you have a phone, and you can be in our VR conference. So this is something that we would like to start eating our own dog food by using the products that we're advocating. So we're definitely getting into an era where VR education is going to become the norm, and it is going to be the preferred way that information gets transferred whether you're a child or as a learning adult, continuously learning adult. And for kids these days, these are pictures I took recently at one of our I guess events, conferences that we were exhibiting. And kids that are a few years old, they just pick up devices and they know what to do. You don't have to teach them. So I call these guys Generation V. The kids that were born post 2010, and they're going to grow up with VR. They're going to think VR is as natural as the kids today who grew up with their smartphones. My kids, they can't not have a smartphone in their pocket, and in another 5 years, 8 years, these kids can't imagine their life without having some kind of a device on their head, kind of an integrated VR AR device on their head. So as educators, what should you be doing, right? First is, I think if you're already here, you're already doing the first step. So you're already going out there and trying to understand VR and AR and trying to understand it deeply. Okay? Second is that you want to teach your family about VR and getting them to try it and making sure that you have these devices at home and you're actually making it part of your daily life, because for your children, for them to be familiar with this is going to be a significant advantage to them going forward, as they pursue their education and pursue their future careers. It's kind of like somebody that knows how to use a computer now, where 30 years ago nobody cared about their kids learning how to use a computer. If you're an educator and you're teaching, bring VR to your classrooms, making it part of your curriculum. I think you'll find that your kids are going to be a lot more excited about learning. In fact, when we were doing our studies, remember the study that we were doing, the tablets versus VR study? The biggest complaint we got from that study was that after the study, all the kids that were randomly selected to be in the tablet group, they all came and they cried. And they said, why was I put into the tablet group? I want to be in the VR group. Can I come back tomorrow? I want to be in the VR group. Right. So that's what we're going to find, is that if there are schools that offer VR as part of the curriculum, that offer VR as something that as an elective, kids are going to be interested. One of the showcase schools I really like to highlight is the Shenzhen Nansan school, the international school there. They have a director of VR. All right, Paula, I can see you're there. And they've been doing this for a couple years. So it's amazing to see a school who have a role called the director of VR and teaching their kids. They started out at the 12th grade level. Now they're kind of going to all their classes from K to 12, teaching them VR and having their kids actually now competing in programming contests for VR. In fact, last year, I think a few months ago, they actually won a contest against university students because they were so excited about the things they're doing. But at the end of the day, if a child is excited and interested and passionate about a subject, they will learn, and they will learn naturally. Right? And that's what VR brings to people. It brings the ability to make anything interesting. I remember when I was in school and trying to learn history was like the most boring class. But if I could go back in time and live at Egyptian time or live in the Tang Dynasty, I think I would actually enjoy going to history class. Right? So lastly, I really would like us all to work together and reinvent the concept of education. Because I think that the schools we have today, it's about making people gather someplace physically and to access the educator who stands in front of them for half a day to 7, 6, 8 hours a day to say something to them. We really need to get to a new model where the kids can actually be part of that experience. They're not being talked to, but they're actually teaching each other, and they're going through kind of how we used to learn, how the apprentice model of actually learning through doing, because that's how we learned for hundreds and for thousands of years. Only in the last couple hundred years since the manufacturing line have we started using these classrooms. And there's there's no reason why we couldn't go back to a more natural way of learning. In fact, the other thing is one of the most limited assets we have in the world is good teachers. And the classrooms that we have today are limited by a size of 20, 30, 40 students. So the best teachers in the world can only teach 30 students at a time. Now, if we allow people to get into virtual classrooms that can support hundreds at a time, we can have the best educators, the Nobel Prize winners. Everybody can learn from a Nobel Prize winner about physics or about mathematics or about whatever, right? And that's going to make the most limited resource we have something that is super accessible. And it's going to also make a high quality education accessible to anybody, no matter where you live or where you grew up or how much money your parents make, right? These are the kind of things that are limiting who gets a good education, who gets into a good school. And how many Einsteins and Hawkings have we missed because they grew up in the wrong part of town, or they grew up in the wrong country? If we can make these devices available to kids around the world, and if you think about how much do we spend to build schools, to buy books and to buy computers, actually we could take a fraction of that and give every child a VR device and give them the access to have, to be able to go to the best universities and the best, to have access to the best teachers. That's where education is going. And I think, you guys here, that means you're interested in helping make this happen. So I'm really excited I have a chance to come and speak with all of you. I think education is going to evolve. And that you guys are going to be doing over the next 5 years. So thanks again. My email's right in the here, and I look forward to, I guess, any questions that you might have. Oh, actually, I think we have a little video I was supposed to play. So how do we play this video? Media, here, or video?
I think you're muted still, Steve. Video? Or no, maybe not.
Does it work? Can you see it? Oh, okay. It's not, I don't see anything on my screen, but if it's playing for you, can you hear anything? Okay. So if you do see the video, I can just see a black screen, but this is a video that we just created about a month ago for our live ecosystem conference. And what it shows is how VR can become a very natural part of your daily life.
好的，汪总，我马上处理。
It's still going. Yeah, it's good. It's taking it outside right now.
Okay. Okay, let me know when it's done because I can't see anything on the video right now. this technology actually sort of works.
That's it now, I think.
Okay, great. So why don't we do any questions? Feel free to ask any questions. Or Steve, do you have anything prepared? Yeah.
Steve, you might be muted. I can't hear you.
Steve, I'm not hearing you either. I don't know if it's the bug or not. You want to just reload the room and see if we can hear you?
Hello.
Hello.
Hmm.
Who's
So, Steve, you want me to, since we can't hear you, okay, I'll go. Hi,
Chris, why
Alvin.
don't you
First of all,
take over?
that was an amazing presentation. I thought it went fantastic, man. We learned so much. Thank you so much for all of that. So, unfortunately, Mike, how do I, since I'm not the controller, how do I unmute people when they want to ask a question?
I'm not sure where Steve went right now. He's the one with the power to do that.
You can bring up your tablet and unmute it yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, I think he just
As you
did
can
it.
hear, people are unmuting.
So,
Is
Alvin,
Steve coming back? Yeah.
I'm
Go
hoping
ahead.
so, because I'm not a controller, so I can't unmute people when they ask questions. Oh, there's Steve right here. Great, Steve, welcome back. We can't hear you, but maybe you can unmute people for us as they have questions to ask. Awesome. So does anyone have a question, want to raise their hand, and then Steve can unmute you to ask the question? All right, great. Okay, we've got Karen right here. Steve, Karen's got a question for us. He's raising his hand. Okay, Karen, you need to now unmute yourself with your tablet in the upper right-hand corner. You're
See? All right.
There
Okay.
you go. Perfect.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hey.
Yes. Thank you very much for that presentation. I wonder how you deal with the issue of the physical effects of the headsets on small children. I noticed there were some very small children wearing the Vive, and you know, I just wonder if there are plans to make some that are smaller and lighter specifically for children, or are there concerns about the physical effects?
Yeah, so I think for very young children, we've tested, and what we found is that the current size and weight probably is still more suited for age 10 or above. Because of the IPD settings, as well as the circumference of the head. Now, you know, we will try to add additional. We'll try to make adjustments in terms of the ergonomics of these to fit younger children in the near future. But you know, for people who are using it, and you know, for young children who are using it, we recommend using it for shorter durations, maybe 10 minutes at a time, and that way there's, you know, either the weight or any, you know, visual impact from having, because when the IPD is not adjusted properly, they're going to be a little bit blurry, and it can you know, create discomfort. So, but if it's short enough duration, they can still get the benefits of being on that virtual field trip without without any extended impact. So,
Thank you.
is there any other questions?
Oh, okay. We got Weimer here. Werner?
Hello?
I think he's trying to unmute Werner now. Oh, there we go, Werner.
Okay,
You're on.
all right.
Okay,
Great.
hello. Thank you, Alvin. That was
Hey
great.
there.
We're South African developers, so always working. Our viewpoint necessarily doesn't come from the classroom, because these things take a really long time to make their way into the classroom. So we're always trying to find a way to sort of go around that, if I can say it that way. So considering 5G and next generation networks, the role that will play for us, being able to deliver content to learners.
Sorry,
not
you're breaking up.
necessarily.
You're breaking up.
I'm so
Can you
sorry.
repeat your last sentence?
Can you hear me now a little bit better?
It's very, very staticky. If you can say
Okay.
slowly, maybe.
Okay, I'm going to speak very slowly and just
Yes.
simplify. Okay, we have a problem in Africa, obviously delivering content to learners due to infrastructure problems, etc., etc. What role will new networks such as 5G play in delivering content to learners? And how will HTC help us deliver content directly to learners,
Sure.
possibly?
So, we're actually working with 5G. I don't know if you saw last week, we actually just did an announcement that we are doing a partnership with China Mobile to explore how to better use 5G in the application of VR or the acceleration of VR to homes. Now, what we do find that 5G is going to be a big improvement in terms of making cloud-based VR accessible, but it's going to probably take, I would say, between 3 to 5 years for 5G to really deploy out on a wide basis around the world, and in some markets, maybe even longer. I think for the initial tests, we'll start kind of early next year. By 2020, there will be some deployments in probably the most popular bigger cities, but for it to get to developing markets, it will definitely take a little longer. Now, a lot of the content that we're actually looking at doesn't necessarily require you to use 5G. I think it's actually almost the opposite, is that 5G needs VR to justify the investment. But VR does not have to have 5G to be successful, right? But cloud VR needs 5G to be successful. So if you can have a PC in the school, you can have a standalone device, that standalone VR device in the school, then the learner can actually have local processing, and you will not be limited by the capability of the network. Now, in 5 years, 8 years, when 5G is everywhere, at that point, you can have everything in the cloud, and you can have a much smaller, thinner device, and you can have devices that will be much lighter for younger children. All those things.
Oh, thanks. Okay, our controllers do need to step out to start our next presentations. And Steve, maybe if you can unmute the audience, I don't know if you can do that or not, but I would love to give Alvin a round of applause and some cheers because that was an absolutely amazing presentation. Thank you, Alvin.
Thank you. Okay, so thanks for your kind thoughts and words. So it's a pleasure for me to chat with you, and I hope to meet you guys actually face to face in the real world sometime.
Thank you so much, Alvin.
Thank you, Alvin.